Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Astro Weather. It is 8 o'clock, and I'm Robert Phoenix, your Astro Weatherman, for about the next 25 minutes. How is everybody? I hope you're dealing with probably the final little winter snap here. We did have our early spring, and now we are here in this part of the world. The terrestrial weather is quite cold. And we have some freezing rain conditions on the outside, but on the inside, we're managing to stay warm and productive. Today, I am joined by none other than the amazing Astro Cat. There he is. Yeah, I met his strike demands. So, sometimes you just have to do what you got to do. Got to give into the terrorists every now and then. No, he's not a terrorist. Anyway, I hope everybody's having a more than decent morning, and wherever you are in the world, I hope your day has been one that's been, at the very least, eventful and chocked with wisdom. And if you have encountered some chaos along the way, remember, chaos is a pretty interesting teacher sometimes. All right, so we are looking at what is happening astrologically. What are the conditions of our day? Well, I would say, based on where we are, that the chaos would probably be a pretty good word to describe some of the energy. We have a Mars-Moon conjunction, and the moon is in Gemini. Again, we're looking at a second decan moon, so it's in that Libra moon. It's all about adjustments. But with the Mars conjunction, I got up this morning and I didn't get much sleep, but I also wasn't tired. And that's kind of an effect of the Mars moon conjunction in Gemini. It's caffeinated, right? It's got some buzz to it. Now, what you do with that energy is another thing, right? It could be scattered. It could be all over the place. We have it in conjunct with Mercury, which suggests that focus might be a bit tricky today. Trying to lock in on how you're going to use your mental abilities, your ability to communicate, articulate, long-range plan with Mercury and Capricorn, because that's what Mercury and Capricorn is about. It's like, what are we doing 6 months from now? What are we doing a year from now? What are we doing 3 years from now? And the Mars moon conjunction is just like now. It's now. So one of the things is that watch where your attention goes today. It's like, you ever play with your cat with a laser toy? Today's the cat laser toy day with Mars moon. And it's like, you're here. Meanwhile, the Mercury is like back here with the inconjunct trying to get your attention. It's like, slow down. Being in the moment's fine, right? Being in the now is fine, but you may want to you may want to slow it down just a little bit. Now, there's some other interesting things going on with Mercury. We've got a Mercury trine to Uranus, which I really like. Now, this is a day where if you slow down enough, here's what you don't want to do today. You don't want to have to redo your mistakes. This is a big component of this energy. You don't want to have to redo your mistakes, and you don't want to have to say, well, this is good enough for now. No, don't do that. If you're forced with a deadline, try to extend the deadline. That's the inconjunct. What's better is to do the work smarter. And sometimes we get pigeonholed in a binary world. It's like, we only have this choice or I have this choice, which is very Gemini. But with the Mercury Uranus trine, if you can hang back a little bit and not get caught up in the broken field of the inconjunct, you might be able to find a hack for whatever it is that you need to do. So this is definitely a day where it's about working smarter, not better, not more, right? I'm sorry, smarter, not harder, not more. Thank you. Little voice back here. So invest in a little bit of slowing down your pace. Don't get on the hamster wheel, and ask yourself, is there a way that I can do what I'm about to do in maybe a quarter less of the time? And if I do it in a quarter less of the time, is there a way to check my results, or is there a way to check the efficacy of what I'm about to do? So this is a kind of an important element. Now, for those of you who are in a part of the country where the road conditions are traveled, I would urge extreme care with that Mars Moon conjunction in Gemini. And then we have all these squares coming off Mars and the moon. You know, I was talking about Mars Moon on Sunday night. If you haven't watched my Sunday night show, that airs from 6 p.m. Central Standard Time to about 8:30, 8:45 Central Standard Time. And I really got into this Mars Moon aspect, and especially with the square with Neptune coming up tonight and tomorrow. And it really feels like it's a time of inconvenient revelation. And one of the things that I talked about on Sunday night, in case you missed the show, is that really the next 48 hours, when the moon moves into Cancer, you know, it's really interesting when we get into this and start to look at the moon as one of the main players, because it moves so often, right? And we can kind of see where it is and gauge our emotional connection to things. But in the next 48 hours, when the moon moves into Cancer, there's a very different kind of resolution that's on the table. We're going to see the moon conjunct Pallas, which is a really interesting aspect where there's pattern recognition, deep pattern recognition, deep intuitive awareness, especially as it relates to family, one's emotional, physical well-being. And I talked about this on Sunday night, that if there's going to be a wave of revelation and what I would call we'll use the word acceptance, or coming to Jesus. We'll use that as a term, a coming to Jesus moment, especially around your family members, and especially around certain aspects that most of your family members have probably urged you to participate in, but may have had right now a serious change of mind. Just wait 48 hours and watch for the receipts to come in. Watch for the receipts to come in, because they're coming. What you don't want to do today is you don't want to get caught up in somebody's panic. And there are people out there that are panicking. I can tell you that right now. They're panicking. They're looking around and they're seeing what's happening in the news. They're seeing what's happening in their body. And this is panic mode. Wait 48 hours and try not to get engaged in your own internal dialogue around panic and even anxiety. We'll get into more of the anxiety piece tomorrow when the moon moves into a tighter square tonight and tomorrow, especially tonight, that moon Neptune square. And in Gemini, that's kind of an anxiety driven, stressed out aspect. Get through it. Get through it, because when the moon moves into Cancer, things begin to resolve themselves. And the phrase that I would use also here is try not to take the bait. Try not to take the bait. Whatever the bait is, try not to take the bait, and especially tonight. Especially tonight. Tonight, the emotional meter is critical. And again, if you can just witness and watch, because when we get into Gemini, right, we're looking at the duality and the polarity of our emotional expression. Well, it can be this, or it can be that, or it can be this, or it can be that. And even in a wide conjunction with Mars, there's a high degree of excitation, right? People they're excited, they're nervous, they're not really feeling completely in their body. So just wait about 48 hours. Some interesting things will be happening come Tuesday and Wednesday. And I usually talk more about that stuff on my show, 15 Minutes of Flame. We still have a wide conjunction with Saturn, Venus, although Venus is separated, but look what's happening, right? Venus moving into square with Mars and the moon. This is part of the mutable crisis and a lot of energy that's just really static, but it passes quickly. That is the nature of mutability. If you can develop your witness here and just kind of watch other people freak out, watch other people drop into their relationship with their past, right? Because the moon represents the past. Now, you can always lend an ear, I suppose, but I would wait. I'd wait about 48 hours. And the challenge here is that, well, if I don't say something, I'm going to be frozen out. If I don't say something, I'm going to be frozen out. This is the opportunity. Just wait. Because the emotional window here is much more receptive. And you don't really even have to do anything. So part of the false dichotomy of today is that you have to do something, right? The next 24 hours with the moon and Gemini, the false dichotomy is you have to do something. The only thing you have to do is take care of your own emotional body, right? That's all you got to do. Now, we do have a really nice sun trine Mars, trine the moon. If you're in a place where you can get out, here it's not really all that conducive to getting out. But if you're in a place where you can get out, I would highly recommend it, because one of the things that can really help you dealing with unease and potential anxiety is moving your body. And we have a really nice Sun Mars trine. And if you exercise and you can't get out, try something different. Do something different. Switch it up a little bit. We also have the sun coming in and sextiling Chiron. That's very interesting. That's a really interesting sextile, and it's going to get closer. So tomorrow we're right up on it, right? We're right up on that sun Chiron sextile. So that is a lot to do, I think, with being more accepting for other people's faults and failings, right? Especially in Aquarius. Like, yeah, okay, we're family, we're an extended family, we're a human family. Yeah, it's okay, right? It's okay. Yes, we know you fucked up, right? It's okay though. And I really like this energy. Also, I think in general, it allows people to take a bit of a risk in some ways. So maybe this is how you present yourself. Maybe this is how you look at your own, path towards healing. And today's star of the day has some very interesting, I think, threads that we can pick up on from there. What else do we have? And we do have the Mercury Chiron square, although it is beginning to separate as well. And those are harsh words, especially Mercury in Capricorn, which is all about efficiency in business. And I think this also has a lot to do with judgment, right? Judgment around self. I'm not further along than I should. I could be further along than I am. I should be further along. And this is where you get down on yourself. Man, I've wasted so much time. And sometimes these things are true and real, and you have to look at them. But I would say that this is another one of those elements where if you witness the critical nature of the Mercury Chiron square, you'll be able to see what's real and sift through it. And I think with this Mercury Uranus trine, again, Mercury's starting to separate a little bit, but a lot of these conflicts where these squares are emanating from can be resolved rather quickly if you're able to look at your situation from a slightly different perspective. Get above it, get outside of it, right? Don't get caught up in the circuit breaker of duality. If you can do that, I think you can manage today and tomorrow, and there could be some interesting innovation today, and the ability to also accept part of yourself that may not necessarily be perfect, and others that may not necessarily be perfect, right? This is the magic of that Sun Chiron sextile. All right, so let's talk about today's star of the day. By the way, thanks for being here. I always appreciate you guys hanging out, showing up. Today's star, it's always an interesting process to figure out, all right, well, who do I want to look at today? Who's noteworthy? Who's interesting, for better or worse, right? They could be scoundrels or they could be saints. And today's figure might fit into that category, both of them, depending upon who you are and how you view his legacy. So today's star of the day is the fellow by the name of Thomas Merton. Now, some of you who are spiritually inclined with a bit of a religious background, especially if you're a Catholic, you probably know who Thomas Merton is. If you don't, then I'm about to share a brief thumbnail of Thomas Merton, who's one of the most interesting people in the 20th century, hands down. Hands down. So Thomas Merton was a Trappist monk, and he lived in a Trappist monastery in Kentucky. He was actually born in France. His father was, I believe, from New Zealand, and he was a painter, and his mother was an educator. His father was quite outgoing and didn't spend a lot of time at home. His mother died when he was 6 years old, and just created a huge cavity in his life. So Merton is a bright fellow, as you'll see here, and he is the epitome of an Aquarian, radical, monastic type. So this is his quote that I really like, and it really speaks to Merton and his astrology. We are not converted only once in our lives, but many times, and this endless series of conversions and inner revolutions leads to our transformation. So the key word there is revolutions, because Aquarians are revolutionaries, and Merton was a revolutionary character. So when we look at his chart, to me, I mean, it's like people will just off the cuff, oh, astrology is bullshit, and Placidus is bullshit. Let me just show you here how Thomas Merton's chart is a classic example of astrology at work. So this is the 12th house. Look at all these planets in the 12th house. What is the 12th house? It's places we don't go. It's hospitals, prisons, sanitariums, monasteries. And the true note is where he's supposed to go in this lifetime. And boy, does he get there, right? He winds up going to Gethsemane, which is the Gethsemane monastery in Kentucky. And this is a very primitive place. Very, very primitive. I mean, it is, for all intents and purposes, medieval. And this is where Merton can escape the world with his true node in Aquarius. The South Node in Leo, Merton always has this interesting dance with ego. And he was a man of letters. He was educated at Columbia. So, and he also knew he had friends who would wind up becoming giants in the publishing industry. So Thomas Merton was a writer. He studied languages and English literature in college, but eventually he gravitates towards the churches of New York and becomes baptized in the Catholic Church, I think around the age of 20, 21, someplace around there. And he winds up ultimately he was turned down by the Franciscans, which is interesting. He applied to be a Franciscan and they accepted him. And then he told them everything about his life. And then they kicked him out. So he had to find a new order. And in a moment of life confusion, he went to this Trappist monastery in Kentucky just to stay. And he was home. So one of the things that he did, and we see this Mercury true node conjunction, is he wrote. And he did not want to write, which is an interesting piece of his personal life story. He wanted to get away from the world. He wanted to get away from the world. He didn't want to be a part of the world. He's fleeing the South Node in Leo. He doesn't want to engage in the ego. But there's an abbot who's at the monastery in Kentucky who realizes that this guy's a good writer and I need to encourage him to write. So he would have 2 hours a day where that's exactly what he would do. And when he was there, he wrote his autobiography at a pretty young age called The 7-Story Mountain. And the manuscript, right? And we have Venus up here in Sagittarius. This will play a large role in his story. The manuscript, this is the ninth house publishing. He's got the galactic center right in his midheaven. So this is a guy with a mission, right? He's got a mission. Now, his mission wasn't always in agreement or in alignment with some of his superiors or people inside of the Catholic faith, but that's another story, and maybe I'll cover some of that. So he sends his manuscript to a friend of his, Henry Giroux, who found, what is it, Farrar, Strauss, Giroux, right? So he sends the manuscript there, gets published, winds up selling 600,000 copies in the first year alone. That's an incredible amount of books, especially for a guy who's the Trappist monk living in Kentucky. Now, what's interesting is that when he begins the 7-Story Mountain, he talks about the day he was born. And he said, on this day, I was born under the sign of the water bearer. So he knew a little bit about astrology. And he goes on to tell his story. And he would continue to publish and be extremely well regarded in the realm of publishing literature, poetry. Lawrence Ferlinghetti of New Dimensions Press would publish his poems alongside those of Allen Ginsberg, Gregory Corso, Ferlinghetti, the Beat Poets, etc. So here, this is quite interesting. He has Chiron in Pisces, so he's a heretic. That's what Chiron in Pisces is all about. He's a heretic. And that's the one big square in his chart, Chiron to Venus, and Chiron squaring Saturn and Pluto. And even Pluto here at 0 Cancer in his 4th house, arriving at a place or a home that would change his life. And with Saturn conjunct the IC, it's austerity, right? That Saturn is austere. I mean, look, his astrology is all over his chart. It's really amazing in a lot of ways. Now, one of the things that he winds up doing is he keeps having these inner revolutions. And at one point, he has to go into Louisville for the day. And he is just, now think about this. You're a monk and you're living this very contemplative lifestyle. And this guy was a restless, absolutely restless searcher. And you find this solace and peace in this monastery. And then he goes into Louisville and he explodes. He looks around and he sees all these different people from all walks of life, different colors. And he is absolutely in love with humanity, which is very Aquarian. He feels in that moment that he's the most alive he's ever been, right? And so then he begins to take on the topics of the day: social justice, inequality, racism. And this is a guy who really is kind of a first generation SJW. And he winds up becoming a mentor for one of the creators of liberation theology. And Merton actually told him that don't abandon your politics. This should be a part of your practice, which again is radical and borderline heresy when it comes to the Catholic order. The other thing that's interesting is right around 1718, kind of the outlier of the Chiron return or the Chirotic crisis. He's at college. He's at college in England, and he's having too good of a time. He's partying, and he actually winds up getting a woman pregnant. So this facilitates his grandfather, who's living in New York, to pluck him out of college and bring him to New York, where eventually he enrolls in Columbia. So this is a very interesting part of his life. These latter teen years, 16, 17, 18, and he is a heretic, right? Total heretic. And then eventually, and this is what happens with Chiron and Pisces, people have to find their heretical faith inside the space of the church or the religion. He's a really fascinating character. And he winds up getting into Buddhism and Zen. And he's really one of the first people that writes about religion and spirituality from a multidisciplinary or an interdisciplinary perspective, and able to connect the dots between the two. Now, he is given hermit status, which is very, very rare. Hermit status, yes, you can be a hermit. So being a hermit is different than being a monk. Being a hermit inside the Cistercian order means that you live alone. You have no contact with anybody else. But then kind of out of the blue, he gets an entreaty, an invitation from the East. And it's to speak at a conference of monks and nuns and people of the cloth from various faiths, not just Catholicism, but also Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. So while he's there, he lands in Bangkok. And while he's there, he arranges a meeting with the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama, right? This is 1968. And his time with the Dalai Lama changes his life, however brief that time is, because one of the things he becomes aware of is the perils of communism. Now, remember, this is a social justice war. He was deeply anti-war. Merton was haunted by the specter of nuclear war and would point out the inconsistency of the Catholic Church and how they would be absolutely 100% pro-life and in support of an unborn child. But in many Catholic circles, they had nothing to say about mass annihilation through nuclear war. And he found this to be almost impossible, this contradiction almost impossible to process in his own life. But when he met the Dalai Lama, he became very clear that communism was not a good thing. So he went back to Bangkok and he gave his speech, which was received with mixed reviews. And he said that communism provides all of the trappings of the monastic life, where everything is provided for you. However, the monastic life cannot succeed in the world. It cannot succeed in the world. So Merton goes back to his room, and a couple hours later, they discover him dead on the floor of his room in this retreat center in Bangkok. It's a very suspicious death. And for all intents and purposes, it looks like he was killed. It's a very interesting, unusual life, very unusual life. There's even a point in time where he winds up having to go to a hospital. I believe it was in Louisville as well. And he fell in love with the nurse. And this was Merton. He was an ever evolving study in contradiction, which is what you get with all of this Aquarius. The guy was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I think lonely, very lonely, and he wanted to experience the ways of the world. But at the same time, I believe that he also needed to complete this mission in solitude, right? This is the South Node. He's not supposed to be in the world with the South Node in the 6th house. No. He's supposed to be over here, and over here is where he goes. Very interesting character. Thomas Merton, the star of the day. By the way, there is an hour-long documentary on YouTube. If you're interested in learning more about Merton, I'll leave the link inside of the show page here so you can find out more about him. Before I go, of course, we have a few orders of business to take care of. One of the things that I do like talking about is the sponsor of the show, which is True Hemp Science. And I have not had my moon dust yet today. I went into the show today with just a straight cup of black coffee. You know, I was channeling Merton. I wanted the austerity of just a straight cup of black coffee. No additives, no supercharged elements, no alchemical elixir, just straight black coffee. Moon dust is after this. Wow, that coffee got cold fast. So I will dive into the moon dust. And where can you get the moon dust? You can get that and many more wonderful products from True Hemp Science, and they're all organically sourced hemp. And my buddy Chris is from soup to nuts, from alpha to omega. He's involved in every step of the process when it comes to this product. He doesn't grow it, but he knows the growers. He knows them. And one of the things that I love about Chris is that he's quite generous when it comes to, you know, our relationship and the relationship with the people who buy the product, right? So if you spend $100 or more and you put in 15MINS, when you check out, you get free product, which is always good, right? $100 more, you get free product, and there's all kinds of things that you can dive into here: oils, edibles, water soluble, and of course, CBD for your pets. And I get a lot of very positive testimonials from Chris's product. All right. At 9:11 a.m., I do a show. Over on my website, and it's 15 minutes of flame, and it's at 9:11 a.m., 10:41 a.m. Central Standard Time, Tuesday through Thursday. And today is going to be a very interesting show. We're going to talk about Joe Biden and the release that the emergency authorizations for COVID-19 are coming off the books on May 11th, 5/11, which would, well, that's a tease. There's a cycle there. There's a tease. In any case, I hope to see you there. Come join us. We have a great chat, and it's pretty informative. You can always book a reading with me too at robertphoenix.com. Go to services, and we can set that up. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. And for myself and Jasper, use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. We'll be back here tomorrow, 8 a.m. for the Astro Weather. Bye for now.